We're now on to stage 3, and for this we need 2 new parts. We need a longer friction pin, and we also need a cross block, which allows us to join a pin and an axle at 90 degrees. Let's start off with a friction pin, and looking at this longer version, it's pretty similar to that first friction pin that we made, so we can use that as a starting point, and then we can just make some adjustments to the model. Let's open that original friction pin file. Here it is. I'm just going to drag it into SolidWorks. And then we're going to save this as a copy and then modify the file. So once the file is opened, the first thing we're going to do is save it as a copy. You can do this by going to File, Save As. And then from the menu, let's choose Save as Copy and Open, which is this bottom one. Let's give it a new name, something like Long Friction Pin, and then press Save. And if you get a message asking if you want to keep the original file open, it's up to you. Personally, I've closed it just to avoid any confusion with that file. Now we can modify this friction pin model instead of making the new one completely from scratch. And the first thing that I'm going to do is drag the rollback bar up to below the first feature. That first feature is the ring that's in the middle of the pin. And this is actually the same on both the short pin and the long pin. So we can just leave this as it is, and we can drag down below the next feature, which is the outer body. Now this is where things start to differ a little bit. On the original pin, we extruded in 2 directions equally. But on this longer pin, we want to extrude in 1 direction, and then the other direction needs to be twice as long. All of the other sizes stay the same though, the inside and outside diameter. To adjust the width, first we've got to edit this feature. So click on the outer body feature, and then press Edit Feature. And let's change the end condition here from mid-plane to blind. So now we're just extruding in 1 single direction. For the first direction, we're going to extrude 7.5 millimeters. And then we want to extrude twice that distance in the other direction. You can do this by clicking here where it says direction 2. For this extrude, we're going to continue with the blind end condition, but we're going to extrude 15 millimeters. So it's double the length of the opposite side. So we're extruding one side by 7.5 and then the other side by 15. And when that looks good, you can press OK. Now that we've got the basic shape, we can drag down below the next feature, which is the outer rim. And that is all the same. We're just extruding that small amount by 0.5 millimeters from the end of the pin. But if we drag down below the next feature, the mirror, we can see that this rim on this side is in the wrong place. So we can just completely delete that mirror feature, and let's just draw another rim manually. So spin the pin around, start a sketch on this end face. Let's choose that inner edge and press Convert Entities. And then let's choose the outer edge on the other side and press Convert Entities again. So you should have 2 concentric circles. One of them's the size of the inner diameter, and one of them's the size of the outer rim on the other end. We can then extrude that 0.5 millimeters outwards. And we should have the overall correct shape there now. We can rename this feature as Outer Rim 2, and then we can drag back down below the next feature. This next one is the middle slot, and if we look at the model, this is actually in the wrong position now. It's straddling that wider part in the middle when it should be further over to the right. So what we need to do is edit the sketch underneath that middle slot feature. So click on the feature and press Edit Sketch. And I'm going to go to a normal 2 view so we can see quite clearly where we're cutting. So the size of the slot is the same. It's still 6.9 by 1 millimeter. We just need to move the position. To do this, we need to delete the coincident relation that anchors it in place on the origin. So click on the point at the center of the slot and then delete the coincident relation. Depending on your view settings, you might be able to just click on the coincident icon and press delete. But if you can't see it there, then actually click on the center point of that slot, and then you should be able to see the coincident relation here on the left, and you can then delete it. Now that that coincident relation is gone, we can move that slot around, and you can see it's turned blue. So let's move it to roughly the correct position, somewhere like here. Then let's set the up-down distance. So to do this, let's select that point in the middle of the slot, and then let's also select the origin, and let's make those horizontal. And then for the exact left-right spacing, I've measured it from the end of the pin here. So let's get the Smart Dimension tool, and let's add a dimension from the end of the pin to the outside curved edge of the slot. Remember, you can hold down Shift to dimension to the arc. And that dimension there should be 4.3 millimeters. And then just press OK, and now we can see that slot is going through in the correct place. Now we can drag back down below the final feature to just add in those final end slots. And I'm just going to rename this feature to say end slots. Now if we spin the model around and we look at those slots, one of the ends looks correct, but the other one, the slot's in the wrong position. So again, we need to edit the sketch underneath this feature. So click on the feature and then press Edit Sketch. If we now go to normal to view, you can see the one on the right is correct, but the one on the left needs to be moved outwards to the left so that it's also on the outer edge of the pin. To move the slot, first we'll have to move the center line that is mirrored about. So click on the center line, click on the point that's fixed to the origin, and then delete the relations there. So that center line is now free to move around. Next up, we know the distance between the slots should be 15.85 from measuring it. So I'm going to double click on this 8.5 and I'm going to change that to 15.85, and that will move the slots apart. We're still not quite in the correct position though, and we're still not fully defined. So what you're going to have to do is grab the center point of this left-hand slot and then just drag it out so it's at the midpoint of the left-hand edge of the pin. And that should fully define your sketch. So this one on the right is fixed at the midpoint of the right-hand edge, and the one on the left is fixed at the midpoint of the left-hand edge. And the distance between them is 15.85. So in this case, because we've got those other relations and dimensions, it means that it doesn't really matter where the position of the center line is. It can only actually be in that one position in the middle. Then when you're happy, press OK, and that will create those cuts. Then the final thing we need to do is just change the color. So let's go to the Appearance, Scenes and Decals tab on the right, and let's choose a standard blue. And now this part is finished, so you can save it. In the next video, we'll be making a completely new part, the cross block, that allows you to join an axle and a pin.